A powerful woman breaks down on a rural road, but when a quiet stranger stops to help, she sees a necklace that once belonged to someone she lost forever. And suddenly, nothing about her life makes sense anymore. The hiss of steam was the only sound coming from under the hood of the sleek silver Mercedes parked awkwardly on the shoulder of Route 177 just outside Shawnee, Oklahoma. A trail of coolant dripped beneath it, carving a tiny green river through the red dirt. Cynthia Hargrave stood beside the car, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight it looked like it could snap steel. She glanced at her phone again. Still no signal. 0 bars, no service, no mercy. The digital clock read 5:42 p.m., and the sun was already leaning toward the horizon. Her heels sank slightly into the gravel each time she shifted weight, and her patience, already thin, was nearly gone. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "Brand new engine. $40,000. For what? To boil itself in the middle of nowhere." Cynthia was used to control. Her schedule was airtight, her staff never late. And problems like this? They were someone else's job. Someone she paid. But not today. Her driver had taken the day off, family emergency, and she'd insisted she could handle the 2-hour drive to her newest property alone. "It's just Shawnee," she'd said. "I'm not helpless." Now she was kicking herself. The wind picked up, and with it came a faint rumble. Wheels on gravel. A pickup truck, older than the car she'd wrecked in college, was ambling down the road. It was the kind of truck you see parked outside bait shops, held together by patches of rust and prayer. It slowed. She squinted through her oversized sunglasses, mentally preparing to wave the driver off. She didn't need help from just anyone. But then the truck stopped. The driver's door opened, and a tall man stepped out. Faded jeans, worn boots, oil-streaked t-shirt. Maybe late 30s. His walk was unhurried, confident without being arrogant. He didn't say anything at first, just tipped his chin and gave her a quick look. Not the kind that lingered, but one that took in the situation clearly. "You all right, ma'am?" His voice was calm. Not soft, but easy. Cynthia hesitated. There was a pride in her that screamed, "Say you're fine. Say you don't need help." But the hood was still hissing, and her designer blouse was sticking to her back. "Car overheated," she said, curt. "No signal. I've been here almost 40 minutes. He walked closer, still a few feet away, eyes flicking from the puddle under the car to the steam. "Mind if I take a look?" She raised an eyebrow. "You're a mechanic?" "Used to be," he replied. "Now I just know what I'm doing." He was already moving toward the hood. Cynthia considered stopping him, but something about his presence made her pause. It wasn't charm, it was steadiness. He popped the hood and peered inside, careful not to touch anything yet. "Looks like a cracked radiator hose," he said after a moment. "Could have been building for weeks. Pressure blew it clean open." Cynthia huffed. "Perfect. It's brand new." "Doesn't always matter," he said. "Sometimes new just means expensive." He glanced at her, a flicker of something in his eyes. Humor, maybe, but he wasn't mocking her. "I got a spare hose in my truck. Not the same brand, but it'll hold long enough to get you into town." "You carry radiator hoses?" "I carry all sorts of things," he said, turning back toward his truck. Cynthia watched him go, then glanced down at her heels, suddenly feeling out of place. The Oklahoma sun was dropping fast. She looked at his truck, dusty blue with dents. The back held a crate of tools, a small cooler, a tarp. He moved with ease, like someone who didn't need much to get things done. "Name's Deshawn, by the way," he said, returning with the hose and some tools. "Deshawn Mercer." She didn't offer hers right away. It wasn't that she was rude, well, maybe a little, but she was measuring him. He didn't ask questions, didn't show curiosity about her clothes or her car. He just started working, hands steady, tools moving quickly. Within 10 minutes the leak was patched and the engine quiet. He wiped his hands on a rag. "That should hold. Might want to have it replaced proper once you're in Shawnee." Cynthia reached into her bag, pulled out a crisp 50. "No need," he said, stepping back. "Excuse me." "I didn't stop for money." She stared at him. People like her didn't hear that sentence often, but he just gave a short nod, almost like he was tipping his hat, even though he didn't wear one, and turned back to his truck. But something caught her eye as he turned. A gold pendant hung around his neck, small, round, slightly tarnished, but unmistakable. Her chest tightened. That necklace! It couldn't be. Not here. Not on this man. Wait! Her voice cracked mid-word. Where did you get that necklace? But Deshawn didn't answer right away. He just stood still, one hand resting on the truck door, like the question had hit harder than she knew. Deshawn turned slowly, his face unreadable for a moment. The wind tugged gently at his shirt, and the pendant moved just enough for her to see the inscription on the back, 2 tiny initials engraved in a delicate script. J.H. Her heart beat louder than it had in years. I said, Cynthia repeated, softer this time. Where did you get that necklace? Deshawn looked down at it, then back at her. There was a pause, like he was weighing how much to say. It was given to me. A long time ago. She stepped forward. By who? He watched her carefully. Lady who raised me gave it to me when I was a kid. Said it was all she had when I came to her. Told me it belonged to my mother. Cynthia's lips parted, but no sound came. Her head felt suddenly light. That necklace had belonged to her sister, Janine. Stubborn, wild, brilliant Janine. The only thing Janine ever cared about more than herself was the baby boy she refused to give up, even when their parents said he'd ruin her life. The baby who disappeared after a fight that ripped the family apart. She remembered screaming. She remembered Janine crying. Then silence. And after that, a letter, just a letter, saying the baby was gone. And Janine wasn't coming back. You said you were given it. Cynthia said slowly. You were adopted. Deshawn shifted. More or less. It's a long story. I was a baby when they got me. I don't remember much before that. Never knew who my mother was. Cynthia's breath caught. She stared at him, searching his face for something. Anything familiar. The shape of his eyes, the arch of his brows, the tilt of his head when he spoke. Could it really be? That necklace. It was my sister's, she said, her voice barely holding steady. It belonged to Janine Hargrave. Deshawn blinked. Hargrave? Yes, her voice cracked. She was my sister, and she disappeared 22 years ago. She had a baby boy. No one ever saw him again. Deshawn took a small step back. Just one. He wasn't afraid. Just stunned. The kind of stunned that sinks deep into your spine and makes the world tilt slightly. She never told me much, he said finally. My mama, Dolores. She always said I came from a woman who wanted me to have a better life. I figured that was just something people say when they don't know the real story. What else did she tell you? Cynthia asked. He reached into his wallet, pulled out an old photo. The edges were worn, the colors faded, but the image still held. A woman with fierce eyes and a bright scarf tied around her head, holding a baby close to her chest. That's the only picture I've got, Deshawn said quietly. Don't even know if it's her or not. Cynthia took the photo with trembling hands. Her knees nearly buckled. That's her, she whispered. That's Janine. The silence stretched out between them, heavy and thick. Neither knew what to say. Cynthia had imagined this moment for years, but in her mind it was always a tragic discovery, a late-night confession, a closed casket. Never this. How did she... What happened to her? She asked, bracing herself. Deshawn shook his head. I don't know. Dolores found me in Tulsa, said I was left at the church steps with nothing but a note and that necklace. The note had my first name and a date. That's all. A lump rose in Cynthia's throat. I thought she ran away, that she gave you up and vanished. But now I don't know what to think. Deshawn's jaw tightened. I used to think about her. Wonder what kind of woman she was. Why she didn't keep me. But I stopped asking. Figured some questions ain't meant to be answered. Cynthia looked at him. Truly looked now. Not just at the man who fixed her car, but at the boy who'd grown up with questions no one bothered to answer. I don't know what this means, she said slowly. But if you're who I think you are, then you're my nephew. Deshawn took a breath, long and quiet. Maybe. But, he added after a moment, I don't need anything from you. I'm not here for money. I just saw someone who needed help. But now that the words were out, neither of them could unhear them, and both knew there was no way to walk away without wanting to know more. Cynthia sat in the front seat of her car now, door still open, feet planted in the dirt, like she couldn't decide whether to stay or run. The sun had slipped lower, streaking the sky in burnt orange and muddy gold. She didn't speak for a while, just held the photo, her thumb brushing over Janine's face again and again. "You said Tulsa?" she finally asked. "Yeah," Deshawn replied, leaning against the side of his truck. "St. Brendan's on 36th. I was left there one night, maybe a few days old. They said it was the middle of July." Cynthia turned the name over in her mind. Janine had spent a summer in Tulsa after high school, just before she came back pregnant. Cynthia had been in grad school in Michigan, barely 23, trying to build her career. She remembered the phone call, the way Janine's voice trembled, how she said, "I messed up, but I'm keeping him." Back then, Cynthia hadn't been supportive. She hadn't known how. Their parents were already furious. Their father called the baby a mistake. Their mother barely looked Janine in the eye. Cynthia tried to reason with her, told her it was a bad time, told her to think about her future. And Janine, hurt and defensive, shut everyone out. One last fight. Harsh words Cynthia could never take back. And then, nothing. "I never knew what happened after," she whispered. "One day she was gone. She left a note and a photo, then just vanished." Deshawn glanced down. "She must have cared, though, to leave me with something like this," he said, touching the pendant again. "It's the only thing that stayed with me. Through all the homes, all the questions." "You were in the system?" Cynthia asked quietly. "Until I was 6. Then Dolores and Marvin took me in. They weren't rich or anything, but they were good people. Stayed out in Okmulgee. Raised me like I was theirs." Cynthia nodded, her throat tightening. The idea that her nephew had been just hours away for years, it knocked the wind out of her. All those real estate meetings, ribbon cuttings, charity galas in Tulsa, and she never once imagined he might be there. "I should have looked harder," she murmured. Deshawn shook his head. "You didn't know." "I didn't want to know," she said, voice low. "It was easier to think she chose to disappear. I told myself she was selfish, reckless, that if she wanted us in her life, she would have come back." She paused. "But I wasn't there when she needed me. And maybe that's why she didn't." Deshawn didn't respond right away. He was watching the horizon, arms folded, thinking. "I used to get mad at her sometimes," he said. "Especially as a teenager. Why leave your kid with strangers? Why not fight to stay?" He looked over at her. "But I also know life doesn't always give people the luxury of fighting." Cynthia studied his face. There was something in his voice. Something old. Lived in. Not bitterness, but truth. He wasn't trying to hurt her. He wasn't even asking for anything. She folded the photo gently, handed it back. "I want to know more about you," she said. "If that's okay?" Deshawn gave a small shrug. "Not much to know. I fix things, cars, bikes, fences, anything mechanical. Been doing it since high school. Ever look for your birth family?" she asked. "Once or twice. Sent some letters to agencies. But with just a first name and a necklace, you don't get far. After a while, I let it go." There was a pause. Cynthia took a breath. "Do you remember your last name?" He chuckled once, a quiet sound. "They gave me the name Mercer." It stuck. Something in her chest folded in on itself. All the money she'd earned, all the things she'd built, they felt weightless compared to this. A man standing in front of her, quiet and kind, carrying the missing piece of her family's story without even knowing it. "You're not just a mechanic, Deshawn," she said. "You're part of something you never got the chance to know." But before he could answer, headlights appeared in the distance, another car approaching, and it was a signal that time was moving again, whether either of them was ready or not. The passing car rolled by slowly, its driver giving a quick glance before continuing down the road. For a moment, the rumble filled the silence between them, then faded into nothing again. Cynthia stood, brushing dust from her slacks. Her mind was spinning, but she tried to keep her voice steady. "I want to help you find answers." she said. Real answers. We could take a DNA test. It wouldn't take long. Deshawn didn't flinch, but he also didn't smile. You really think I'm your nephew? I do, she replied, eyes locked on his. There's too much lining up. The necklace, the photo, your age, her leaving around the same time. He leaned against his truck again, arms folded. What if the test says I'm not? What if I'm just a guy who happened to wear a piece of jewelry that looks like something familiar? Cynthia hesitated. Then I'll still be grateful you stopped to help. But if you are, then we both deserve to know. Deshawn looked away, thinking. The sky had gone lavender, and the cicadas had started up in the trees. It gave everything a strange, buzzing backdrop, like the world was gently shaking under their feet. I've lived most of my life not knowing, he said finally. Taught myself not to care too much. Got used to holes in the story. But yeah, part of me always wondered. He turned his gaze back to her. You really want to do this? I wouldn't have offered if I didn't. Deshawn nodded slowly. All right then. Let's do it. There was a quiet agreement that passed between them. Two strangers clinging to a thread, maybe fragile, maybe strong enough to change everything. Where are you staying? He asked. I've got a property in Norman, she said. About an hour from here, but we can stop in Tulsa on the way. There's a testing center I've used before. Discreet, quick turnaround. He gave a small, thoughtful frown. I'll follow you, just in case your car gives out again. A strange sort of smile crept onto her lips. You think I'm going to let this car break down twice in one day? Just saying, he replied. Luck don't always run in streaks. Back on the road, Cynthia drove slowly, watching Deshawn's headlights behind her. Her fingers tapped the steering wheel. Her throat was dry. Every time she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw his truck, a part of her wanted to slam the brakes, run to him, and ask questions she'd buried for decades. Was Janine okay? Did she ever try to come back? Did she talk about us? Did she regret leaving? But she kept driving. By the time they pulled into Tulsa, it was past 7. The strip mall testing center was still open. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed softly above polished linoleum floors. Deshawn filled out the paperwork without hesitation. Cynthia paid in cash. When they called them back, the technician didn't ask questions. She just took 2 swabs, sealed them into separate envelopes, and said results would be available in 3 business days. But Cynthia had connections. She made 1 phone call. 2 hours. Tops. Back in the parking lot, Cynthia leaned against the passenger door of her car, looking up at the stars. It had been a long time since she'd noticed them. City life had stolen those quiet moments from her. I used to think Janine would come back one day, she said quietly. That she'd just show up with the baby, ask to stay, and I'd say yes. Deshawn glanced at her. And if she had? I'd like to think I would have helped. But back then I was just cold, obsessed with building a future. I thought caring too much would slow me down. Yeah, he said, almost to himself. I've met a few people like that. They shared a faint, tired laugh. Then Cynthia turned to him. If this test says what I think it will, I don't want to disappear again. I don't want you to be some name I met one day on the side of the road. Deshawn was quiet. I'm not asking for anything, she added. I just want to know what you'd want from me, if anything at all. He looked at her carefully. I don't want money. Never did. I believe you. I just want truth. That's it. Been living around it too long. But truth, she realized, comes with consequences. And she wasn't sure she was ready for all of them. The testing center had closed for the night, but the receptionist agreed to stay back until the results were ready. Cynthia sat in the driver's seat with the AC humming, hands clenched around the steering wheel even though the car was parked. Across the lot, Deshawn leaned against his truck, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the night sky like he was reading it for answers. The car felt too small, too quiet. She stepped out and walked over to him, heels clicking against the pavement. Want something to eat? She asked. There's a diner just down the road. They're open late. Deshawn glanced at her, then at his watch. Sure. The diner was small, fluorescent, with chipped tiles and a few sleepy regulars scattered in booths. They sat in a corner near the window. A teenage waitress took their order, grilled cheese for Cynthia, meatloaf and sweet tea for Deshawn, and disappeared with a quiet nod. Cynthia looked around the place. Nothing fancy. Nothing staged. Just people living. I used to think everything had to look a certain way, she said, stirring her water with a straw. Success, family, even love. But real life doesn't care what you think it should look like. Deshawn cracked a faint smile. It sure don't. Do you have a family of your own? She asked. He hesitated. No wife, no kids, just me. You ever want one? Used to, he said. But life keeps pushing me from one place to the next. Feels hard to plant anything when the ground's always shifting. Cynthia nodded slowly. I never had children. Not by choice. I kept saying, maybe later. Later never came. She paused, looking down. Sometimes I think I stayed busy, so I didn't have to feel things, the way we lost Janine. It was easier to pretend I didn't miss her. Deshawn shifted in his seat. You said you had a fight before she left? Yeah. A bad one. I told her she was being selfish, that she was throwing her life away. She said I didn't understand anything about love. She laughed bitterly. And maybe I didn't. The waitress returned with their food. For a while, neither of them spoke. Just the quiet clink of forks and the soft murmur of the late-night crowd. When they were halfway through their meal, Cynthia's phone buzzed. A message from the testing center. She stared at it for a second too long. Is that it? Deshawn asked. Yeah. He wiped his hands on a napkin. You gonna open it? Her thumb hovered over the screen. She pressed it. Read it once. Then again. She swallowed hard and set the phone on the table. Screen down. It's a match, she said. You're Janine's son. Deshawn sat back in his seat. He didn't smile. He didn't frown either. Just closed his eyes for a second, like something inside him had finally settled. Guess I knew, he said. Just needed someone else to say it. Cynthia reached for her glass, hands trembling. I thought I'd be relieved, but all I feel is this heavy mix of guilt and something else I can't name. Deshawn's voice was soft. It ain't your fault. Not all of it. But some of it is, she said. I gave up on her, and if I'd tried harder, looked harder, you wouldn't have had to grow up asking so many questions. He didn't argue. He didn't reassure her. He just sat with it. And maybe that was kinder than pretending it didn't matter. What now? She asked, almost afraid of the answer. He looked at her for a long time. I don't know. I meant it when I said I wasn't looking for anything. But it feels strange knowing there's someone out there tied to you like this. You don't have to decide anything tonight, she said quickly. But I'd like to stay in touch. Maybe get to know each other. He nodded slowly. We'll see. But just as they stood to leave, Deshawn reached across the table and slid the old photo toward her. Not to take it back, but to let her keep it. The photo rested in Cynthia's lap the whole drive back. She didn't tuck it away. She didn't fold it. She just held it, carefully, as though it might break if she let go too long. They parted ways in the parking lot, quietly. No hug, no big moment, just a soft good night, and the agreement to check in later that week. Cynthia drove back to her house in Norman, her chest hollowed out and full at the same time. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in her study, surrounded by awards, plaques, and models of skyscrapers she'd helped build. But her eyes stayed fixed on a picture frame she hadn't touched in years. An old snapshot of her and Janine at the lake, both laughing, wind in their hair. It was the last time they were truly close, before everything cracked. By morning she knew she had to tell him the rest. Not just about Janine, but about her role in what came after. The parts she'd hidden, even from herself. She called. He answered on the second ring. Would you meet me again? She asked. I'll come to you this time. Deshawn sounded hesitant, but agreed. They met later that afternoon at a small coffee shop in Moore, halfway between their towns. It was quiet. No distractions. She didn't waste time. Janine didn't leave because she wanted to, Cynthia said. She left because of me. I told her to. Deshawn blinked. What do you mean? I told her she was ruining everything. that she was throwing her life away over a baby no one in the family wanted. She asked me if I'd help her, if she could stay with me for a while. And I said no. Her hands trembled now, barely able to hold the paper cup in front of her. I thought I was being logical. I had this plan for how life should go. A single mom with no job didn't fit into that. I told her she'd figure it out on her own. The next day she was gone. Deshawn didn't say anything. He just watched her, not judging, just letting the weight of the truth land where it needed to. I don't know what happened after she left. I don't know where she went or why she never came back. But I do know one thing: she was never weak. If she left you at that church, it wasn't because she stopped loving you. She must have been desperate. Scared, maybe even sick. He sat back, exhaling slowly. For years, she went on, I told myself she was the one who broke the family. But I think I did it first, and I'm sorry. The silence between them was thick, but it wasn't cruel, just full. Deshawn looked down, then at her again. You were young, scared. People do stupid things when they're scared. I didn't just do something stupid, she said, voice cracking. I let her vanish without ever trying to bring her home. And that's something I'll carry for the rest of my life. Deshawn nodded. So will I. That admission felt like a door opening. Not to forgiveness, at least not yet, but to honesty. They sat like that for a while, the afternoon sun sliding through the blinds, warming the table between them. You ever wonder where she is now? He asked. Every day, Cynthia said. I tried looking, he admitted. A few years ago, went to that church again. Talked to a pastor who'd been there in the late 90s. Said a young woman used to sit in the back, real quiet. One day she was gone. No name? No, just a sad smile and a necklace. Cynthia's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She'd done enough of that last night. What would you do if she walked in here right now? He asked. She thought for a moment. I'd tell her I was sorry, that I've spent years building everything except what mattered, and that I missed her more than I ever let myself admit. Deshawn looked away, his jaw tightening slightly. Yeah, he said. Me too. But even without answers about Janine's fate, they both knew something had changed between them. The silence was no longer full of strangers, but something closer to family. 2 weeks passed, not out of avoidance, but space. Cynthia didn't want to push. She'd made her mistakes and knew better than to try and fix things overnight. But the silence wasn't empty. It carried something new now. Understanding. A strange kind of rhythm forming between them. She texted Deshawn every few days. Short, simple messages. No pressure. He'd reply. Sometimes with just a few words. Other times with a photo of a car he was fixing, or a note about a barbecue joint she had to try if she ever found herself near Henrietta. Then one Saturday morning, she picked up the phone and called. I'm hosting dinner at my place tomorrow night, she said. Small, just me. I was wondering if you'd come. A pause. Just dinner. Just dinner. No speeches, no expectations. Another pause. All right, he said. What time? She smiled. 6. Sunday arrived clear and bright. Cynthia spent most of the afternoon cleaning parts of her house she hadn't touched in months. The dining room table, usually buried under paperwork and property brochures, was bare now, set with plates, linen napkins, and a roast in the oven that filled the space with real warmth. Not staged warmth. Actual, lived-in comfort. The kind she'd almost forgotten how to enjoy. At 6:00, the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Deshawn standing there in a button-up shirt, dark jeans, and a quiet, unsure expression. Smells good, he said. You're right on time. I'm 5 minutes late, which is exactly on time at my house. She replied. They ate at the same table where she'd once signed million-dollar contracts. No assistant, no clinking wine glasses, no catered silence. Just food. 2 people. And something that felt more honest than anything she'd built before. Halfway through the meal, she pushed her plate aside and looked at him seriously. I've been thinking, she began. About everything. About family, about what comes next. Deshawn leaned back, waiting. I know we can't erase the past, she said. And I know you don't need anything from me. But if there's even a chance we could build something real, I want to try." He didn't speak, just listened. "I'm not asking you to call me family," she added. "Not yet. But I'd like to get to know you better. Not because I feel guilty. Because I care." Deshawn set down his fork, folded his hands. "You sure about that?" "I've never been more sure." He looked around the house. Clean, precise. Everything in its place. "This ain't my world," he said. "It doesn't have to be," she replied. "You're not a project. You're not something to fit into a box. I just want to know the man you are now." He studied her for a moment. "That's not easy for me. I know. A beat. But I wouldn't be here if I wasn't willing to try," he said. She smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, but real. A quiet curve that reached her eyes. After dinner, she walked him to the door. They stood there for a long second. Not saying goodbye, but letting the silence speak again. Only this time, it was warmer. Before he stepped outside, Cynthia reached into a drawer near the hallway and pulled out a small, flat box. "This was Janine's," she said. "I've kept it for years. I think you should have it." He took the box, hesitating before opening it. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with a tiny inscription on the inside. "Love doesn't quit." Deshawn swallowed. "She used to say that?" "All the time," Cynthia said. "Even when we were kids." He closed the box, nodded once, then turned to leave. But before he reached his truck, he stopped, looked back. "Next time, I'll bring dessert." Cynthia stood in the doorway, watching him go, not with regret, but with something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, because the past doesn't always give us closure. But sometimes it hands us the pieces, and it's up to us to decide what to do with them. If you've ever let someone go without saying what mattered, maybe it's time to reach out. Not for apologies, but for truth, for healing, for peace. Subscribe for more real stories that make you think, and maybe make you feel just a little more human.